Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session, panel discussion, elevating candidate experience to enhance candidate engagement. For this session, Ceipal is joined by Deborah Augustus, Senior Category Manager, Erica Woods, Director, Contract Programs, and Philanthropy. So I'm a little tongue twisted, Erica.
It's a hard one.
Moderating the panel, we have a new row, Director of Business Development and Marketing. But before we launch into today's session, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. First, each session will be recorded and available on demand through Ceipal's website. A follow-up email will be sent to all registrants with the recording and any other relevant material. Secondly, we will have a Q&A session following the discussion. All participants have entered the session muted, so please enter your questions in the Q&A or session chat on your right-hand menu, and we'll address them at the end of the panel. Finally, we're on a strict schedule today. To save time for our Q&A period, we will give a 5-minute warning to the speakers. After the warning, the speakers will conclude their conversation and we will open it up for the Q&A. Please note, this session will end promptly at the scheduled time. At that point, we encourage you to visit our agenda tab and explore our other topics and speakers in the 4 different tracks. If you do not visit the agenda tab, you will automatically be redirected into the next session on the same track. And that's it. Over to you, Anu.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. And I hope you have had a very useful session so far. And today I am so delighted to be talking to 2 strong women leaders and industry experts, Deborah Augustus and Erica Woods. Erica Woods has 15 years of experience in the IT staffing world and currently, as Spring mentioned, manages the contractor programs at Apex Systems. Her focus, as she so succinctly puts it, are the 4 C's: candidate, client, consultant, and community. Now, her love for alliterations is obvious. A fun fact about her, she loves Airbnb and spends a month in different cities each year. She just did Austin and has Savannah, Portland, Oregon, and one of the Florida Keys on her list for the next year. Deborah Augustus, she is having some technical difficulties logging on, and the Goldcast team is helping her through. I'm sure she'll join in very soon. A little bit about her. Her career has spanned more than 20 years, including roles in procurement, supporting human resources, finance, legal, facilities, marketing, and information technology. Whoa. Today, she's responsible for the procurement and sourcing strategy in support of the corporate and professional services categories across the Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals organization. An interesting fact about Deborah, she is a keen long-distance runner. Am I audible, Erica?
Yes, you're good.
Just checking in. Okay. With that, let's dive right into the topic. To set the stage, candidate experience is quite simply a job seeker's perception of an employer based on the entire application process. This includes job search, communication, feedback, of course, onboarding, and employer branding too. Candidate experience can affect an applicant's opinion of the staffing company for reasons that may have little to do with the actual open position. Go figure. And that brings us to candidate engagement. 65% of candidates lose interest in the job opening after a negative experience during the process, and hence this topic. So my first question to you, Erica, is what have been your specific challenges in ensuring a good candidate experience in today's talent shortage market?
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear that statistic. The reason my job exists at Apex, I'm the voice and I own the candidate and contractor experience and paying attention to it and making sure that we're measuring it and recognizing what we could be doing better. And I've been in this role for about 6 or 7 years. And it was driven by one of the statistics that there's more detractors, more unhappy candidates than there are happy candidates when it comes to their experience working with any company. So I've been working on building out different initiatives and programs for, going on about 8 years. One of them is the main one is responsiveness. Candidates, that feeling of being ghosted. I hear that from job seekers week after week. I've applied and absolute crickets. I've heard absolutely nothing. I had one person who told me they applied for 256 jobs and heard absolutely nothing on their applications. And so it is a real problem, and working on responsiveness and communication, as well as educating both our internal teams as well as educating job seekers on what else they could be doing to combat that, has been a huge part of our focus over the years.
Wow. So you talked about ghosting from the staffing agency side. Now we are hearing a lot on the other side, right? How do you deal with that? I know we are digressing a little, but it was just something that I couldn't let go.
Yeah, no, and it's a shared concern. And I grew up at Apex professionally as a recruiter. I recruited from 2005 to 2011. So I unfortunately had to experience ghosting firsthand. People not only not showing up for interviews, but doing all the paperwork and accepting a job. And then, I talk to them a morning of when they're on the way to work, and then they just never show up for whatever reason. So it's a concern on both ends of the table, and it all goes back to just transparency and relationships, and especially in kind of our modern age, what can we do to vet on both sides? So we educate job seekers and recruiters on how to vet candidates, as well as, build a lasting relationship that's going to create loyalty, and in the hopes of minimizing that ghosting or just going MIA.
So just to dig in further on that, you already touched on a couple of things that you're doing. Can you elaborate a little more on the specific measures you're taking to enhance the whole experience?
Yeah. So one, for us, it started with research, and I still do this, every year. I kick off my January with understanding current job seeker behavior studies, motivators, just, different surveys, and what people are looking for to kind of optimize a candidate experience. So that research happens continuously. And that was a huge focus when I kind of initiated my function, many years ago. So once we understood that, and kind of the pain points and the questions job seekers have, and just what they wanted to know and what they needed help with, we initiated a huge content strategy program. And we've now built out over 600 very specific pieces of content to help in all aspects of the job search. Anything from resumes and LinkedIn, kind of those classic areas, to how do I engage in networking? Who should I be networking with? How do I overcome anxiety or imposter syndrome in an interview? So we try to have like all of our bases covered in terms of resources that can help our candidates. And then one of the second things we've done is now we've used technology and tools to automate and deliver those resources to them in kind of bite-sized chunks at different phases in their experience as a candidate, as a contractor, and then even once they're an alumni, a former contractor that we want to stay engaged with.
That is, I have gone over your bio. I know that you walk the talk. But one of the things that you said that really caught my attention, you said you do research at the beginning of the year. I'm curious to know if you can share a little bit about the research of this year. What did it reveal?
Yeah, so we have access to tools and insights through Dice, through Glassdoor, through Indeed. We get a lot. We utilize a third-party tool in our proposal data to get some good information. And then I personally, I have, once you've been doing this for a little bit and you start, getting your Google on, you come across resources like, PayScale is one of my favorites. Monster puts out some really good insights. What's another one? Like, again, Glassdoor puts out a lot, the Muse, and then, JobScan is one of my other hands down favorite resources for understanding what's going on with job seekers, what's their feedback, what are their grievances when working with folks in our industry. Because if you don't know the specific pain points and frustrations, you can't devise a plan to combat it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When we were talking earlier, when planning for this, one of the things you mentioned is some staggering statistic about how only 6% of the resumes even get looked at. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, we do a lot of job seeker Q&A panels, and we try to, again, have educational events in resources in different formats, YouTube videos, articles, infographics, just webinars that you can sign up for. But one of the sad realities, and it is a sad reality, but knowledge is power, is that, in 2016, I read a study that 25% of resumes got seen, but that's dipped down. Multiple studies and different organizations reported, 4 to 10% of resumes get seen, 5% of resumes actually get looked at and prioritized by the applicant tracking system and get, recruiters actually get eyes on those. Apex teeters right within that 6 to 10% range. So from personal experience, I know that is a real challenge, and that's something that we're working on tackling from multiple angles. But yeah, that is the reality. But once you know that reality, there's multiple strategies that we can educate job seekers on if they're willing to pay attention and invest in becoming an educated job seeker. To get around that and help their application and resume get noticed.
So what I'm hearing is there are specific things a job seeker can do, and there are specific things you can help the recruiter do. Can you give the recruiter angle?
Yeah.
What can they do?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been an organization that invests heavily in training and development. We have especially people that come to our organization and have worked before, the feedback I get on our training is so positive. And, so we have robust training that goes into it, that all new employees go through a wide range of training. And that includes training on just customer service etiquette and relationship building and how to create loyalty and the types of things and traits we want to exhibit, and kind of our protocol for making sure that we're treating our candidates and contractors right. And we back that up with data that we get, because we also survey, our folks at various intervals and timeframes. So training is a huge focus, candidate engagement. I have a training later today with one of our recruiting teams on what we can do to provide a better candidate experience. So it's ongoing training even after people start.
Okay, so even if it's a recruiter who's been on the job for a few years, it doesn't matter. They are constantly updating their skills.
Yes. And one other thing that we do too is, we've used technology in a lot of ways over the last, let's say, 4 years, but, we have an automated workflow technology that we've integrated into our applicant tracking system to recognize if we have, individuals, contractors who haven't been communicated with in a while, and then it sends an automated trigger email to our recruiters like, hey, it's time to check in on these individuals. And then we attach resource guides. So we create kind of conversation checklists and different documentation, best practices, SOPs, if you will, on what they can be doing But we do use technology to trigger and initiate that to make sure that everyone's covered.
That is going to be my next question for you. I know you are a huge techno geek, if I can say that. You've done a lot of stuff in that field. Can you share with us some more examples of how you leverage technology to enhance the experience?
Yeah, well, to get more specific with the resources that we've created, because I think that's probably the biggest benefit that we've provided to candidates and job seekers especially, is we use a tool to trigger communications at certain points. So if a candidate applies to our organization for the first time, a lot of feedback I get from people is they either receive nothing or they get one of those auto alert, like, thanks for applying. That's it, right? But we've really tried to give them a roadmap of a job search navigation map of, here's our recommendation for how to embark upon an effective job search. And then we include links to different resources to provide them even more education. And then, we have even triggers and prompts that if they don't get contacted, it triggers out resources to help them with engaging with recruiters and optimizing their resume, because a huge part of that is they're just not taking additional outreach, they're not networking, and they're not, trying to beat the applicant tracking system by optimizing their resume. So that's kind of how specific we get in providing value to our candidates, which has really been above and beyond. And then I think the other big area two other big areas is we've utilized chatbots and different RPA and different bots over especially the last 3 years to help with things like data entry, which is a pain point for every organization, much less just staffing. So that's a big one. And we also are using Power BI now for dashboard reporting to give us a clear picture of the contractor engagement.
That is. So I have a question now. I know the Q&A was supposed to be at the end, but this is such a good point to ask that question. Venkat asks, what are the technology tools that you use for candidate experience? You mentioned Power BI for the reporting part. Anything else that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, so for chatbots, we just use the basic Google chatbot, which has been really effective because, one of our goals is to, be as responsive as possible to candidates, but we also want to save time for our people, right? What can we do to save time for our recruiting team? And so the chatbot was a big one that, we invested time on the front end to really just talk through what are all the questions that people have, those frequently asked questions, and then, put answers to them. And on average, our chatbot engages with about 600 of our contractors on a monthly basis, because again, we measure and report on everything. So that's a big one. And then we use, I know for most staffing firms, the time entry is a big one. So we use tools to help there. We use a tool called Herefish that automates into our applicant tracking system. And then we also use Twilio as well for specific tools.
Thank you so much, Erica. I was, while preparing for this discussion, I was talking to the various account managers of what they love about our applicant tracking system. So Ceipal is the ATS behind the ATS that we use. And across the board, all of them said that one of the small but effective features they find is text to hire. Because they make sure that they get the permission of the consultants beforehand, but throughout they're just sending out those touch points, communication points, and they find that present generation candidates find that it is far easier to get a response out of them through text than So a simple thing like that, but it does help enhance the experience. Just saying a good luck just before an interview starts, or it could be a more important thing like, "Hey, has the paperwork been done?" So that is. So now I'll get a little more specific. So once we talked so far about when we source the candidate. Now, how do you, once they get onto a project, how do you, as a large staffing company, I know you have thousands of consultants, how do you keep them engaged beyond day one on the project? How do you continue the conversation with them?
Yeah, and that's where I've spent most of my time over the last like 6 to 8 years. And I'll never forget my boss telling me, like, come up with a engagement strategy and different ideas to better support and a strategic plan. And I was so lost at the beginning. It goes back to research and education. I spent some time on the front end researching what are all the top places to work? What do they have in common? And I read small, mid, large size companies and identified kind of all the different buckets where we could be doing something, right? Because there's only so much control that we have, because a lot of the people that we place, contractors and consultants, they're working at another company, right? They're spread across our 2,000 clients that we support. And so, buckets like benefits, we have some control over. But things like on-site culture, we don't, and the management that they're dealing with on site. So we really invested a lot in the areas like consistent communication, support, how to effectively orient and set yourself up to start a new contract on the right foot. So a lot of performance-focused resources. We've built out an entire performance library. And it's funny, I don't know if I shared this with you when we prepped, but again, of the 600 resources that we have on our website, I still, I think it's fascinating that the number one clicked by far is how to manage your anxiety when starting a new job. So it goes back to we use Google Analytics to measure and then make sure that we're spending time focusing on the right content to provide our folks. But we've got additional content is one area. We have newsletters, we have different programs, we've invested a lot in the training and sort of like just how to support certifications and also help our technologists maintain their certifications. I think the most fun one since COVID started is virtual events we didn't do those before outside of training. And so that's really been a stressful but fun endeavor over the last year and a half. We do about 8 virtual appreciation and just different types of events that we invite folks to.
So what are these events? What induces a contractor to even join it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have over 20,000 contractors typically at any given time. So, we try I'm a big fan of variety, right? So last year we did, a improv hour, right? Where we had an improv troupe, and because we're trying to do something that's fun, like everyone's is burdened, is overworked, is stressed out. So we try to provide those development opportunities, but also kind of fun breaks from the grind. One of the things I'm working on setting up now is a magician, like for some Friday fun. But one of the things that's been kind of a surprise hit is we partner with the American Cancer Society. That's one of our big corporate philanthropies. And we started doing charity video game tournaments. And we've now done 7. And the response to that, the amount I've learned about video games, not being a gamer over the last year and a half is mind-boggling. But it's been fantastic. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
We are glad to have you here. We're glad
Thank
to have you. Erica, I have written down the points. I'm going to come back. Video games, immediately my son is joining Apex.
Yes.
Deborah, before we continue bringing you up to speed,
Okay.
um, I already did introduce you, so everyone knows about you.
Thank you.
My first questions to you was, what are the challenges that you as a company are specifically facing?
So I think, I think the biggest challenge that we're facing is we have some very remote locations. And to find talent in those remote locations has been very challenging. So we focus a lot on very skilled resources in a very remote area, making sure that we're looking at the marketplace for the cost structure, making sure we're paying the right amount. We don't want to overpay, but we don't want to underpay, because the few resources in those areas that could meet the needs of the business are being pulled among other companies as well. So if they're paying more money, obviously we're going to lose those temporary workers. So our key focus has been around really keeping our finger on the pulse of the marketplace, to accommodate those remote locations, bringing in additional suppliers that might be able to help that as well. So those are the key things that we watch, and that's our biggest challenge.
That I know that some of the locations like Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I mean not necessarily Malincrot, but pharma companies in general. And most of us don't even know that place. The only reason I know that place is because I met my brother's then girlfriend for the first time there. So, otherwise, I wouldn't know such a thing exists.
Yeah.
So it's interesting for me that you really, when you say you have to have a pulse on the cost structure, so it's like an ongoing effort.
Yes.
Do you take input from the suppliers? How do you do that?
So we work through an MSP. So we have a master service provider organization managing our whole contingent workforce program. And then there's the suppliers within that supply base that they lean on to gather, resumes and intellectual knowledge in certain areas of the country. And so they manage all of that for us, but they have to keep us very closely informed, as well as we're looking at it from a full-time employee perspective. So we kind of compare notes, right? So you're not, you don't want to necessarily pay a contingent worker the same amount as a full-time employee, because there is a benefit to being an employee, but you also have to compensate for the fact that our full-time employee is getting benefits from us, whereas the CW is not. So it's really balancing what's the right number from a, say, hourly perspective for the contingent workforce program.
So in this journey, do you feel that the suppliers, some suppliers have done something differently, or there's still potential? Any ideas that you have what suppliers can do differently in such a tough market, in remote locations, competitive structures?
Yeah, it's a gamble. I mean, it's constantly trying to motivate the folks, trying to help them understand the bigger picture beyond that dollar. But it's tough in those remote areas, because if, they may get on board with that thought process, but, 6 months into the assignment, they're getting offered an extra 50 cents down the street. They're going to jump for it because their pocket is screaming for it. Right. So it's challenging. It's something that we have to continue to look at, continue to understand, ask the questions, keep the candidate engaged, even post assignment, to make sure that they understand the value of what they're bringing to the table and how they're helping the bigger picture. I think if the suppliers who will manage their employees for us, because that's their job, right, is they stay engaged. Don't just hand the resume to the MSP to put in for us to select and then wash your hands of it. They really need to keep those candidates engaged in how how they fit into that bigger picture. I think when they feel they're a part of something, they would be more engaged. I see, Erica, you're nodding your head. You totally agree with that statement. I mean, because sometimes I think contingent workers think they're expendable. And, you know, because it's a temporary assignment. But if we help them feel engaged, but we have to be careful of co-employment, right? You can't bring them in and make them feel like an employee, because that's not the case. And we'd want to make sure there is a clear delineation. But you have to be mindful of how they feel as a person, and keep that in mind in the conversations.
Yeah, Anu, I would love to jump in on that, because, you know, I read all of the surveys that our contractors get, and the number one thing that we can avoid with people leaving is not getting what they need from the on-site manager. But a lot of the time that on-site manager can't provide that. I'm going to use feedback as an example, right? Providing meaningful, motivating feedback to validate that someone is just simply meeting expectations is one of our biggest challenges. And a lot of our clients can't give that feedback for the reason Deborah just mentioned. So we work on soliciting that from them and then providing it to them directly, but we still only get that feedback half the time. It's not recognized how important just simple feedback and validation is. That was music to my ears, Deborah.
Yeah. I think it's systemic throughout all businesses. It's not just, you know, sitting at a desk versus sitting, you know, in a light industrial area. I think it works both ways. I think as employees, we want that feedback. So why would you think that the contingent worker wouldn't need that as well, that they feel like they're a part of something? So yeah, Erica, I totally agree with that. Implementing surveys and having conversations, and whether it's feedback on a, you know, whatever, say they're on a 6-month assignment, maybe you do it once a month, you feed the information back to the MSP, who gives it to the supplier, who then comes back and gives it to the employee of that supplier. I think they have to keep that conversation going through all the parties. There's a lot of third, fourth parties here, but it's necessary to keep them engaged. Yeah.
And the other thing that I love that you said that we struggle with is that feeling of just being included, right? I have conversations with, you know, contractors that are like, they don't treat us differently. We don't get invited to trainings. We don't get invited to, you know, barbecues, right? Like they're just treated like outsiders. And when you go back to, it's not just a contractor, it's a human being that wants, and we all want that feeling of connection and being inclusive. I loved that point too.
So a couple of things come to mind over here for me. One is, Deborah, this is for you. Do you feel there's a difference between, you manage across categories, IT, non-IT, light industrial, all that. Do you feel there's a difference on how each community needs to be handled?
So just to make sure I'm clear on the question, does IT treat their contingent workers differently than light industrial? Is that what you meant? I'm sorry.
The other way around. Do light industrial workers need more hand-holding, and more engaged, and you know, more of that conversation than an IT, or is it across the board?
I would guess it would be across the board. I mean, we're all people, whether we're standing every day at a line and moving things along, or we're sitting at a desk, you know, doing coding in the back. I mean, we're all people. I would think, though, that, you know, depending on your, you know, like I said, if it wasn't in a remote area and you can get another body, it would be different. But I think that for us in where I'm sitting, those folks need it, the connection as much as somebody sitting at the IT desk or a finance desk, whatever. I don't think there's a difference for us. If, like I said, if it wasn't in a remote area and they were a dime a dozen, yes, they probably still need the hand-holding, but we wouldn't feel the need to do it as often, right? I think there's just something to be said to the circumstances you're sitting in.
From our end, we do feel that, we do need to do a little more hand-holding, especially during onboarding stages with light industrial workers. As what would you say, Erica, to that?
I mean,
know.
it goes back to every single person's different. One of the workshops we do workshops for a lot of our client groups. And I was very happy that in one of the leadership groups that we did a series with last year, people openly admitted that they weren't good with one-on-ones and they weren't understanding the motivators and what people needed to be successful. And, you know, the classic question of like, what keeps you up at night wasn't being asked. And so it's helpful doing those things live because that, again, we identify what else can we be creating for our clients? Because that's, again, another angle, part of the 4 C's, right? What can we do to provide to our clients to help them with the parts they need to do, the pieces of the pie that they own for a successful experience? So it goes back to educating yourself on what you can be doing and asking of each person and giving each person what they need. And yes, people need more at the beginning, right? That first 30 to 45 days is when people make the determination. Is this what I expected? Am I happy? Do I see myself here? And if you're not engaging them in the right way and catering to them, especially in that first 45 days, then you really run the risk of turnover.
A very good point. Yeah, that's so. You already did talk a lot, Erica, about some of the interesting, fun things that you've done. You touched a little bit upon some of your more successful programs. So, 2 questions there: biggest success in terms of candidate experience, and number 2 is if someone is not a contractor with Apex, but you talk about so many amazing resources. If I want to go and see, is there a way for?
Yeah. So I think the biggest success, I mean, I thought about that from, you know, kind of a corporate macro angle, and then my favorite individual success story, you know, from the kind of the company angle. We partner with a third party survey company to get feedback again at every aspect of the process. And, you know, we measure NPS is our main measurement, you know, KPI for success, and or 4 times the standard like staffing industry, which, you know, makes me really happy. But again, I also recognizing that job seekers have to deal with so much pain. I'm also conflicted about feeling happy that we're 4 times the average. But my favorite personal success story, and this goes back to a candidate challenge, is utilization of the resources we provide them, right? Utilization on their end. We had a candidate that one of our lead recruiters on the East Coast worked with, and they were second place. They were the runner-up 5 times in a row. But that candidate then took advantage of the resources. They took over 2 hours of interview training that we have on our website, accessible to anybody. They did a mock interview with our career coach, which is another program that we offer. And then the 6th time was a charm. So that just stands out as like my favorite, because a lot of time it's nerves, it's imposter syndrome. It's not knowing your elevator pitch, right? You can do the job, but your portrayal, right, is what needs work. And so that's what I'm most proud of with what we've put together to help with the candidate experience.
Oh, I love that story. Love it. Thank you, Erica. Deborah, yes, what would you say has been, during these trying times, one of your most successful stories?
So I'm not as close to the candidates as Erica sounds like she is. So from a buyer perspective, which is the seat I sit in, I look at it from an overall strategic perspective and what program is in place for the overall CWP for my company. And so in engaging a brand new MSP a few years ago, we've brought to the table much more ease of use. And, you know, we use a tool, we use Fieldglass, but we use Fieldglass now for everything from contingent workforce to independent contractors. And we're looking at, you know, bringing in SOW as another program. And having a really good MSP who really thinks about you as their client, as well as the supply base direct relationship, and bringing in the right suppliers and keeping the supply base minimal so that they all have opportunities and more successful opportunities, because the supply base is not just any supplier that contacts us. And believe me, I get contacted multiple times a day from suppliers wanting to become part of our CWP. And I just don't think that's a smart way to do it. I think in order to get to the point of this conversation, candidate experience to be positive, they have to have more opportunities to be a part of it. And so when we implemented the new program, I think it strategically brought us to a place that when you think about it from a tactical perspective, the strategy drives those tactics to be a positive experience for all of the candidates.
Thank you so much, Deborah. That was, I've heard you talk about it before, so I know that I think this was one of the first projects you took over once you joined Mallinckrodt, right?
Yes, it is. Yep.
I do want to make sure we answer this question. Clarissa Morgan, she asks, do the recruiters not see all resumes from applicants that apply to the advertised job?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one. I mean, your average company, big companies, and, small staffing firms included, the average job posting can get over 1,000 applications, right? One monster study I read, and this was like 2 or 3 years ago, said the average application had like 250. Average job had 250 applications. So one, it's just not feasible for a recruiter or corporate recruiter or talent acquisition professional to look through all of those. But again, you have to keep in mind that almost every company has an applicant tracking system or a VMS that prioritizes and ranks resumes based on the language used in the job description. So if you're not mirroring that and it's not in the top 10 to 20% rank, then it's even less likely to get seen.
Yeah. And just to follow up to what Erica said, and talking with my HR business partners, we see 100% of what the MSP sends us. But we are positive we're not seeing 100% of what they're getting. They're doing a screening first, but then we see whatever they put in front of us.
How do both of you see this? So final thoughts, how do both of you see the next few months panning out in terms of the Great Resignation, the talent shortage, your specific areas?
Do you want to start, Deborah?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a tough market out there. I think that everyone's fighting for candidates, and we just have to be smart and keep watch on what's happening out there, and really understand who's applying to the jobs and act fast, because they're interviewing in multiple places, and the first one that makes the offer, that's the one they're going to go with.
Yeah. That's our number one piece of advice. We do a lot with software engineers. They've got 3 offers in 5 days, right? So gone need to be the days of multiple step interviews, waiting 2 to 3 weeks to give feedback. So that quick action. And then also, again, engagement on our side matters, but engagement with the hiring manager matters just as much. What are you doing to build rapport, to not jump into just grilling somebody, but actually give them the details that they care about, right? A lot of that's missing, like technology stacks, roadmap, project details. People are not giving candidates the details to get them excited about a role, and all of that needs to change.
Excited.
Fantastic. Erica, Deborah, Anu, thank you so much for this wonderful session today. And I'd also like to thank everyone for joining in. We encourage you to visit our agenda tab and explore our other topics and speakers in the 4 different tracks. If you do not visit the agenda tab, you will automatically be redirected into the next session on this track. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.